Man of the match turn, Italy. 2013. It had been 2 months now. The first time that Lavinia had set foot in her son's room since the accident. Pietro had just passed his 15th birthday, having spent the last 12 months of his life on a secret mission that would consume, and eventually destroy him. By the time she and her husband, Sandro, found out, Pietro had become the most infamous schoolboy in all of Italy, if not the football-watching world. By then, it was almost too late. Now, it was over. She opened the wardrobe and saw his folded and pressed clothes. Impeccably stacked, never to be worn, at least not by him. On top of the pile, his Juventus shirt. That caused her to cry again. Why couldn't he have been into basketball? She wondered to herself time and time again, his father blaming himself for those visits during infancy to the old Stadio dell'Alpi, wondering if he had not insisted on those father-son outings, the pairing may still be in place. Tragedy always sets a place at the table for culpability. There are always new ways for you to find blame for yourself, and how a million insignificant daily actions can change the course of the planet's trajectory. Lavinia had traced to her son's death back the purchase of a certain pair of socks, changing Milk brand, even her Spotify playlist. It was too soon for her to move on, and yet somehow, she felt like all eyes were upon making sure she didn't, seizing the moment to remind her that her son was gone, should she ever look like she could think about anything else. The carabinieri had already been through his things more than once, but as she rearranged the clothes for the last time, a flash drive fell onto the floor. She put it in the laptop and saw there was only one file, marked Il Confessional. She clicked on it and sat back. She had only heard second-hand accounts of the event, so this would be in some way cathartic, she hoped. This is Pietro Parmesano. My journey has come to an end. I am the only person who knows this, but we are hours, maybe days away from the revelation. Then it will be too late. Would I do it all over again? I'd say yes, but I'd hope not. I won't get the chance anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This is my story. You don't want to know all the background. You'll just skip it anyway. I had a delightfully happy childhood. I was still having it until I got involved with this. The hardest part now is knowing that my mother will suffer as a result of my actions, my father too, but he will get over it, or at least give us that impression. I'll count you in from the day that person's transfer changed me from being a kid who scribbled mean messages in a notebook, to a fully fledged cyber psychopath capable of mobilizing a gang of ultras and gaining access to places that should have been much more secure. It seemed unlikely that one of the best footballers in the history of the game, Craig Cavanagh, would make a move from Barcelona to Juventus in the summer of 2011. He was already 31 by then, and he had done everything in his career, most things twice, and most things he did seem to alienate the Italian football fans. And yet, after successes with Everton, PSG and Barca, he decided he would have one last throw of the dice to appease the Italians. Everybody here hated him, and with good reason. Everton were responsible for resounding victories over fancied Italian sides, as were Barcelona, but his highest level of villainy was playing for England, in their glorious period under Eriksson, when they won 2 World Cups, eliminating Italy in 2002 and beating them in the final of 2006, with the European Championships in between that saw him score a hat-trick against Italy in the 5-0 semi-final defeat, or victory, depending on your viewpoint. He could have gone anywhere but to choose Italy. Not one of the Milan sides that would seemingly have suited him better, not even Roma. No, the prick has to bring his likable, do-gooder brand of goal-scoring magic to my team. Well, I was not going to stand for it. I did not know just how I was going to stand for it at the time, but it's a move fast. He signed on my 14th birthday, just after the 2011 La Liga season had finished, but it would be nearly 3 months before the Calcio started. That gave me some time to drum up some hatred online. I had always been something of a whiz in the hacking department, so envisaged no problems in obtaining the means to carry out my work, until I was found out by then. But imagine if I could destroy him before my 16th birthday, then they would not even be able to try me, my scant understanding of Italian law led me to believe. The first Juventus training session was scheduled for after the summer break, but he would not be required until the last week of July. There would be a couple of friendlies, but he was expected to arrive somewhat removed from his physical fitness under the guardianship of Guardiola, that scans well, and would be eased into the first team. Juventus had no European football for the season, so his workload, famed to be limited to say the least. I posted a message on one of the Ultras forums, the one with the reputation for being most intense, by intense I mean racist and extreme, urging them not to allow this stain on our great nation's colours, and they should not boycott the unveiling. Quite the opposite, they should show their disapproval at this clear insult to Italian pride. I had supplanted the identity of a lawyer who seemed famous, fake LinkedIn profile, the lot, and claimed I had the means to help anyone who took this to another level with me. I was particularly fond of my closing remarks. Have we not suffered enough as Zebra with all that was thrown upon us merely 5 years ago? Have we become so blind to our return to power that we will gladly welcome someone who is an affront to our club and all Italian people? We must fight to make sure he is begging to leave in the January transfer window. Would that I formed a Facebook group entitled Cavani and let them see it grow. A few nudges in the right direction, and by the time June was over, more than 1,000 were mobilized to spoil his unveiling. Was it that easy? Were people that bored? That was the time I thought it was not really worth continuing, but it became like a drug, to see how far I could push it. Like any addict, I gave the same spiel that this rouse would be my last, while planning the next. So that I did not have to do all the work myself, under the guise of the lawyer, I apologized to him. I only borrowed his identity, nothing more. He is innocent. I recruited a number of high-profile ultras to mobilize the masses. These fools were completely taken in by the idea of being headhunted for organized thuggery. I made them send a video of themselves showing off their nationalistic tattoos while singing Il Canto degli Italiani to prove their worth. Some of them could barely hold back the tears as the words came out. How touching. My dear soldiers. I shouldn't laugh, but as time goes on, I have actually begun to wonder who the enemy was. For the time being, it was that English swine. His arrival was getting ever closer. Before the end of June, club chairman Andrea Agnelli had received more than 1,000 letters from ultras, written by me, the lawyer, and sent for them to sign. I could not trust their spelling and lexical choices, urging him to reconsider this choice and informing him that the fan base would not endorse this signing. We received no response, so can only assume that they did not take us seriously. Another issue was that thousands of Juve fans were actually quite pleased that a double World Cup winner with 3 golden boots to his name and averaging over 20 goals a season since 1998 in the Premiership, Ligue 1 and La Liga would sign for a club that was embroiled in scandal merely a few years ago. This meant that even though our xenophobic voices would be heard, the jolly clapping of the mindless t-shirt buying populace would threaten to ruin everything by failing to take into account what is important. They would soon see that I was right. Preparations were of the utmost importance. Our leaders seemed legitimate, but a trail of fake IDs would lead the authorities a merry dance, should we be investigated. My first instinct was only to request the assistance of these thugs, yet once it transpired how much disposable income they seemed to have, well, it appeared rude not to let them allow to contribute. Enjoying being one step ahead of the game, while not expecting anyone else to be, I became a pioneer in the use of the fledgling cryptocurrency Litecoin. It was surprisingly easy to use and keep my funds anonymous, not bad for a 14-year-old. We changed the name from the rather pathetic Cavani to the delightfully pompous Gruppo per la Liberazione dello Spirito Italiano, or Glidasai. Our numbers soured. People were falling over themselves to join. It was ridiculous. We even opened our doors to non-Juve fans. After all, this was beyond Turin. Despite a surge in applications, Chief Ultra Mayhem, Fabrizio, made sure that those taken on with important roles in the dissemination of my message were not lunatics who would bring the project down. That sort of thug was to a penny and was best kept in the piazzas drinking and abusing the Stranry. On the day he was presented as a Juve player, 7,000 people turned up to see him. A record for the club. More than came to see Plo and Vidal, our other big signings that year. I had no problem with the latter. He had not insulted the Italian nation and, after years in Germany, was obviously keen to better himself. Plo was a great Italian in the classic sense. Women wanted him and men wanted to be him. I felt sorry for him already and wrote him a letter apologizing for the disgraceful circumstances and explained that he would soon be liberated from the curse. We had replica kits without the sponsor's name on them and replaced them with our Glidasai logo. Our voice settled in one of the stands and accounted for almost a third of the people there. While kids and parents waved excitedly at the destruction of the essence of Italy, we made our opinions heard. There were strange looks from the chairman and other top-end staff at the club, and we were told to quieten down in no uncertain terms by stewards and daring fans, but most saw the components of the group and decided not to meddle. Of course, it seemed like just an anecdote, but the press pounced on us. This was a story. Some of the more articulate thugs gave passionate and prepared speeches regarding their intentions, and we received messages of support from all over Italy. Not long after, we had followers in Germany, Spain, and ridiculously, England. This was a bothersome burden for the board at a difficult time. The Italian FA were actively monitoring all aspects of its business, and this was the last thing they needed. By now, I actually had recruited proper legal staff. Well, they offered their services for free, as did everyone. It is such a binder, just in case, which should read when things get properly messy. All used false names, but my number 2 was particularly good and patriotic. He actually believed I was the person I claimed to be, but I allowed him to take the surname Piola in honor of Italy's finest goal scorer and double World Cup winner. Piola was summoned to meet Agnelli in an out-of-the-way Turin restaurant to try to bring this matter to a head. Piola told him it was not about money, and that Mr. Bears I would be contacting them soon, with everyone duly appalled at this affront. In the meantime, I became depressed about how easy it was to hack into the club's IT system. Then again, if I had managed it with Evo and LinkedIn, why did I expect the club to be some super secure site? It turns out that he was temporarily using a villa that belonged to Buffon, someone we expected much more of as the person who he scored against in the final of the 2006 World Cup in Germany, condemning Italy to defeat. Buffon should be constantly asking for forgiveness for not making the save, rather than folding towels for the infidel. Since 2002, Cavani had only accepted an annual salary of 100,000 GBP for his personal use. The rest was used to fund social activities in Liverpool, Paris and Barcelona. Even the percentage stake from his transfers, in the case of Juve, 38 million euros, meaning he should be paid 3.8 just from the transfer, but doesn't take it. I was sure this was a ruse and he has everything stashed away on an island somewhere. I would divulge this information as soon as I unearth it. This meant that Buffon's place would be too expensive for him to buy, unless he convinced the club to pay for it, or the traitor waived rent. Either way, it meant I knew he would be there for a while, maybe a month or so, while he looked for something else. The property was located in the exclusive area of Cavaretto, outside the city and popular with the elite and footballers. As it was clear that he had no intention of adopting Italian culture, for the foreseeable future he would shuffle between his home in Barcelona and Turin, wherever possible, using the chairman's private jet when available. That made me physically sick. I spewed. Could we open our asses any wider? This was as bad as when we let Hitler in. This actually worked for me as it meant the place was empty for a couple of days per week. The season had not started and he had a clause in his contract not to sweat. Sorry, I meant play friendlies, so it was just an hour's training 3 times a week or something. Talk about throwing money away. The house was protected. I say protected, but I reckon the system could be hacked by a child. Bad example, it was. Once inside, I limited myself to moving a few things around, nothing too headfucky, just things that might make him scratch his chin, for now. I made sure that should he change the access codes, I would be automatically sent the new ones via an encrypted mail through Tor. It would be nice if they made me work for it once in a while, it is all too easy at times. I took a memento of my stay, an Everton tie which I planned to burn as soon as I got home, and, making sure that the coast was clear, returned back to my parents and summer homework notebooks. I had access to the phone calls as well. Most of them were pointless, as he could not speak Italian and I could not speak Spanish. His wife was a Spanish actress and they had 2 young children, twins aged 6. Buffon helped him with anything he needed in Italian, or he would speak Spanish slowly until some sort of understanding was reached. I heard Buffon on the phone to the security company asking to change the codes and do a patrol. Within seconds I received a mail detailing the new codes and the scheduled patrol. The next day I went, but only to make sure there was no untoward business with the patrol, and that the schedule sent was the one they were keeping to. Of course it was. Nobody ever thinks about stuff. The next time, I got a little more adventurous and left a note for him on the fridge. I also unmatched all his socks and changed the foodstuffs in the pantry for others of the same brand, but different flavors and stuff. Great fun. The next day was his home debut. Iglai Dasai would be in attendance at the match, occupying half of the Standard Ultras enclosure behind one of the goals. The idea was simply to boo every time he touched the ball. Childish, yes, but it had to start somewhere. Ideally, he would score, and all the group would turn their backs to the pitch and deliberately not celebrate. Thankfully, he came on as a sub, which gave extra gravitas to our work. When he scored 8 minutes later, a decent strike, I'll admit, the stadium erupted screaming the name of its new hero. All the Glidasai turned their backs and refused to celebrate, claiming the final score was 1-1. This made the news and led to further exposure. We took our names from amalgamations of players who were on the all-time goal scorers list for Italy. My lawyer was then called Giuseppe Riva and after some furious letter writing, was invited to provide a column for a certain right-leaning daily. Riva offered the intellectual vision of the project, which was then sanitized for the masses and translated into mindless racism. I was in fear of losing sight of the actual purpose of the project. There was so much going on, but was reminded of my work upon his return to Turin. Now, there was serious concern as to the fact that his residence was far from safe. I paid someone 500 to enter after me, after I had wiped the security footage, and potter about. He knew he would be taken in for questioning by the police, but was actually prepared to take one for the team. My word, did people have nothing better to do? With the police under the impression that they had their man, the city of Turin was deemed safe again and Cavana returned to training. By then, we had infiltrated other parts of the club. There was someone in the canteen who refused to serve him, or gave him cold coffee, little things like that, messages. Then we managed to get some players on board, at first just nobodies from the second team and lower, but soon other players realized that he was no good for the club. After 10 games, our numbers were almost all of the stand behind the goal. Huge parts of the ground fell silent when he scored, certain players did not even pass the ball time, or risked losing possession when he passed to them, on those rare occasions. He was such a lazy player. One of his most famous quotes was that I like to have lunch or room with the keepers. I never get a chance to see them during matches. He probably didn't even need to use deodorant. I once saw stats of his for a CL final where his total distance travelled was 3.2 km. The pundits made out that was something to proud of. A goal and 2 assists are no substitute for hard work. Our goal boycotts were doing well, as were bribed car park attendants who broke eggs on his windscreen. Annoying, sure, but would that be enough to make him leave? I doubt it very much. I had to up my game. With his family arriving in September after his wife finished shooting a new film in Madrid, why does nobody notice that he donates his salary, yet she makes a fortune from the movies? Double standards. I had the chance to shift up a gear. I made a rather deliberately poorly cut montage of some of her films. No need to book a flight for the Oscars, in my humble opinion, though changing the end of her scenes with grisly murders from low-budget horror movies. A nice touch. With the phones still tapped, the DVD was sent by ordinary mail via a follower in Bari. This made me privy to extra information that he had kept from her as not to alarm her. Now he was forced to inform her that someone had been into the house and that the police suspected someone was bugging the place for the Glidaci. Then, he had to tell what the Glidaci were. This was easier as our manifesto was now available online. Basically, we demanded the removal of this player from the club, and any other player, official, professional or even tea lady who assisted him, should also be banned for life. We were already making plans for life after Buffon, but when Plo took him to see his exclusive vineyard, then that was the end for him too. The temptation was to keep going, gradually raising the temperature to achieve my goals, but that would have been too obvious. With them living on the edge of fear, I took a step back and sent mails from several non-existent supposed big players who had had a change of heart. Relief, for them, while I planned my next move. I sincerely hoped to have him out of the country before requiring the use of the kids, but needs must. Meanwhile, our support outside Turin meant we were represented at away games. One time away to Catania, the attendance of 23,000 people featured 7,500 Glidaci who enjoyed a 0-0 draw. Despite the praise from the Englishman, that was a proud moment. But it was clear that deep down, where it mattered, we were seen as something of a joke. Now was the time to leak a fake email from the Juve chairman refusing an investigation and recommending the player man up and take responsibility for his own security. We also added in bits about him not pulling his weight and regretting the purchase, despite being on 15 league goals before Christmas. This mail was sent to the team psychiatrist in theory, but somehow made its way to the player. This was a significant move as it all added up. Why play to crowds who didn't cheer your goals? Why play for a chairman who didn't value your efforts? Why live in a city in which your wife is afraid? Why bother trying to change a country that seems to hate you? These little seeds of doubt, I hoped would eventually convince him to leave. The main motivation on my part now was stubbornness, rather than conviction. Since beginning the procedure, I had always thought that he was the enemy. Now I am seeing that the enemy is everywhere. People can be bought for pennies, or will even pay you to hate en masse. Their ridiculous doctrine, drafted by me, sounded less and less plausible every day. All I wanted was to distance myself from it, yet felt consumed by the need to achieve my goal. I decided to kidnap him. The winter break gave me a chance to work out just how to do this. They moved out of the Buffon place just before Xmas, as the wife now believed the place was cursed. The new place was smaller, whilst in the same neighborhood, and offered improved, yet equally hackable, security. The lack of football and general all-round launch into festivities meant most of the nation forgot its due calling to detest that Juve player. In the new year, I had plans to take advantage of the player being alone as the wife was taking the kids out of the international school in Turin and putting them in one in her hometown of Seville while she filmed the latest Almodovar movie close by. Sensing a chance to see the last of her and exacerbate her desire to leave the club at the end of the season, ideally beforehand. During the night, and with lovelies, I made my way undetected into the twin schools and left a crudely photoshopped image in their desks, hoping it would be the first thing they saw the next school day. The image simply showed two gravestones with their father and mother's names on them and a date not too far into the future. Delighted with the quality of my work, I went to McDonald's and faked being an average teenager. I tried so hard to be happy as the fries went cold, then made my way home. I observed my mother and father while they ate, claiming I had an upset stomach, and wondered what I was doing and whether I should stop. The reaction to the photo in the school caused quite the furore. I planned my next move, and even began to consider something of an exit plan, when I was sent a copy of an email from the chairman to the player himself. The email, with a lexicon inferior to my own work, mentioned the club not taking any more liability for these lapses, and that if he could not organize his own family's safety, he should in no way blame the club for these misfortunes. My heart almost stopped. I thought I was the cleverest. Now someone had worked out exactly what was going on and was, daringly, using me. I knew this would be the first of a barrage of communications. My upset tummy from the night before was enough to get me the day off school, as I monitored developments. Whoever was using me was taking advantage of the language barrier, another oversight, as the well-versed and internationally educated Italian entrepreneur was fluent in English, yet suddenly sending hastily scribbled messages in Italian. I'm surprised they didn't chuck some Piedmontese in for good measure. Cavani was excused from training and had a brief conversation with the chairman, the latter being somewhat taken aback by the player's tone. One would suppose it would be down to the stress of the situation. He and his wife went to the school and were met by the police. Despite the chairman's supposed lack of interest, the police were taking the accumulation of matters seriously. I had an overwhelming urge to be as far removed from this incident as possible now. When the next email arrived, I knew it would depend on me. I was not as clever as I thought, or at least I had underestimated the people I thought I could control. I was sent a load of code. To most people that would mean nothing, but I knew it was the trail that would lead everything right back to me. The last part of the message was decoded. Continue with the plan. We want to see the picture in the kids' school for real. I swore. It is quite odd because I don't usually swear. I surveyed my options. I could go to the police and tell them I have been a very bad boy, am wholly repentant and would be delighted to embark upon some reparatory community service to undo the harm caused to all. That should work. I would not be very popular, but maybe in the long term it could work on my CV. Look at what I am capable of, I would say to a potential employer. Imagine if I used my powers for good rather than evil. And they would laugh as we signed the 7-figure deal. Another email came in. Don't even think about trying to save yourself, or it will be your parents in the graves in the photo. Was this a bluff? Could I afford to call it? I was in something of a pickle. My plan to kidnap him was far from foolproof. In fact, it did not go far beyond waiting after a game and asking him politely to go with me. I could break into his quarters and threaten him, but at the end of the day, I am a 14-year-old boy and he is a world-renowned sports star. I mailed them back and said that I had no plan. They responded with a photo taken from a car window, just enough of a revolver showing, and the name of the shop where my mum worked. I decided to now become officially terrified. Now my stomachache was real. I could not face food. It was quite the relief when my mother came through the door, safe and sound. As she laid the table, I received another mail with a photo taken from inside our flat, showing the kitchen table as it was laid. They had cameras inside. I wanted to write back, if you think you can scare me, but then I realized I was too terrified to finish the thought. How does a lad my age go about kidnapping a professional footballer? What are my terms? How do I hold him? He would overpower me. They may well notice he has gone missing. I had to find a way out. But there was no way out. The next day, I got a call. It was my mother's voice. Dad was in hospital with a broken leg, an accident at work. Could have happened to anyone, just one of those things, she said. I couldn't even go to visit him as I had a clock running against me. I knew I had 8 hours to kidnap the player, or something worse would happen to my mother. For every hour that I took to get the job up and running, an accident would befall an innocent person in Turin. Just in case I did not believe them, photographic evidence was sent. At 11 a child was run over. It would survive but walking would be complicated. I told them I did not have the means and burglars entered the house of 2 elderly residents, inducing a heart attack in one of them. By the time 2 o'clock appeared with me no closer to a plan, a mix-up in the traffic lights system had caused a multiple pile-up. It is now 7 minutes to 3, I am just going to go to the house, I know he is in, I still have access, somehow, I will complete the task. This is my story of how things got so twisted. I hope to see it back soon and maybe even laugh about it. Sorry Mum. Sorry Dad. The video stopped. Lavinia had never cried so much in her life, and not long ago she buried her only son. She knew the next part. He left the house, claiming he was going to play football, and never returned. CCTV footage filled in the gaps. It had gone 3 by the time he made the station. A fire in a school filled the news. Now he did not even need the updates from his own blackmailers to see the extent. He would take 40 minutes to reach Kavanaugh's residence, almost time for another disaster before he could even act. He had a change of mind, we now know why, and took a taxi. He was never going to get away with it, so decided the best course of action was to arrive as quickly as possible and try to prevent more mayhem. When he was close to arrival, he saw that the police had cordoned off the area, and was passed by a black Merc, with Plo driving and Kavanaugh in the driver's seat. He told the driver to take him to the nearest train station. Distraught as he bought a ticket to return home and plead for his life. He received a phone call. The screams he heard were unmistakable. Someone had forced their way into the flat and was threatening his mother. He was far away and his father in hospital. He knew it was real. He knew he could do nothing. He knew it was all his fault. He walked to the platform as the Turin-Porto Nuova train pulled into the station. He felt that he could not solve the situation when all he had to do was board the train and make it end. He never did. Before anyone could react, he fell forwards and was swept away by the vehicle. The assailants, threatening his mother, while enjoying their venture, received a call and were stopped. Almost apologizing, they left the flat and disappeared. Lavinia removed the pen drive and sought out information on the incidents that Pietro had claimed were the reasons he had been driven to do what he did. She did remember something about a fire at a primary school on the same day, but that was at a disused site that was due to be demolished. It was rumored to be the work of bored arsonists, but the damage was minimal. Indeed, many saw that they had actually done the council a favor. The other incidents either did not occur or were wholly exaggerated. Pietro, in his altered state, was perhaps unable to distinguish between the crudely put-together news items and reality, convinced that his actions would lead to untold harm to his family, believed they would only stop if he took his life. No child was run over, at least not intentionally to frighten Pietro. There was no burglary. An old man did die of a heart attack, but at 84 that was hardly a newsworthy item. It was certainly not provoked by anything other than time, saying that was quite enough of that. She was still recovering from the shock of the intrusion when she got the call. A husband in hospital and a son in the morgue. She had had better days. Soon she could not remember the better days as the police questioning became more and more intense. Why could she not explain why Pietro had jumped? They made her watch the video from the train station time and time again. What was he involved in? And now this video. Would that help? Was there any clue in the video that could lead her to the truth? Convinced that villains always make one grave mistake, immediately despising herself for that choice of words, she called her husband and they watched the video together. It was no easier for her the second time, and now she had to console him. Nothing stood out, even on the third watch. What was the point of taking it to the police? Pietro had already been discredited on numerous occasions. Rumors were abound regarding his implications and involvement with the Glidassi, but nothing was ever proven. It seemed he had been too careful. Would proving he was the ringleader actually make things any better? She doubted they would. The world moves on quickly. We are now in April and Juventus are heading towards a Scudetto thanks to the Englishman's goals. Lavinia insisted in one last final watch of the video before turning in. She looked around the room, still untouched, to see if there was a clue there, but saw nothing. Racking her brains through all the movies she had seen, she remembered 7, then noticed his framed Juve shirt in the video was the away shirt he used in games, not the signed one that normally adorned his wall. She called her husband, who had just managed to achieve sleep for the first time since the incident. They took the shirt down from the wall, now it was the signed piece, and searched it. On first glance nothing came up, but there was something in the left sleeve, a micro SD card. They spent more time looking for an adapter so the contents could be read than they had watching the video. Eventually, removing a card from an old digital camera that had the fabled adapter, inserting it into the now overly warm laptop, He opened the files. One contained a series of random letter and numbers. They later learnt this was code. Another file was a Word document that they felt comfortable with, and the other was an X file. The latter they knew from installing Skype and things, but were unsure what it was for. The return to the document. Before you read this, copy all the contents of this disk to the hard drive. In my left Nike shoe, you will find 6 more USB sticks. Make 6 copies, 1 on each on. If something has happened to me, please send the entire file to the police officer whose name and email is at the bottom of this note. I have hidden this for a reason. Perhaps nothing will happen, and I can just go on with things while I try to forget this incident. If this is the case, leaving it lying around may be harmful to my future, assuming I have one. The reason I took so long to leave on that last day was because I was close, so close to writing a code that could free me from this. I never got the chance to run it but was pretty sure it would work. I am not asking to be exonerated just for the real perpetrators to be brought to justice. The reason I stopped was because I was getting the messages that they were truly hurting people, that they would go after you, that they broke Dad's leg. I felt I could buy more time. Somehow, if I got to speak to Kavanagh, I felt he might even have gone along with it to save you. Ridiculous. This was my last work. If you see the time of the last save, it is 6 minutes before I left the house. I was tying my shoes and coding at the same time. I'm sorry for everything and love you. I wish I knew why I started this when you gave me everything. Pig-headedness forced me to continue. Fear of losing you forced me to finish it. I hope you never read this, but if you do, send the code file and exe.file. I guess this to Coperitiliano@Carabinieraspecialeforcilades.it. She was working undercover on this case and had made contact with me. She said they could not act until they had something concrete on the people blackmailing me, which was coming from much higher, and until she did, this would remain buried. Send it. Bye. Pietro. The parents did as instructed and mailed the info to address given. Lavinia felt strangely proud of her son whilst at the same time harboring anger at the foolish, possibly even pointless way in which he died. Who was controlling him? How had he gone from a foolish schoolboy with a ridiculous plan, to the puppet of some crime organization? Was he just removed for someone else's enjoyment? A response came 4 minutes later from the police. They had sent it from Pietro's old Hotmail account. Apparently that was a big no-no. They informed the police, who took a further 7 minutes to arrive, that they were not especially au fait with hacking etiquette and asked them what Tor was. The undercover policewoman introduced herself and gave a brief description of what had occurred between her and Pietro. When he was found, the investigation was basically cancelled. Someone had clearly meddled. I should not be here, but I am sure that what you have here will make the trip worthwhile. I want you to know that whatever remains unseen, I do not know what you have viewed so far, this will probably not help you to forgive your son. He took some wrong turns. By the time he realized how wrong, it was too late for him to get out. Don't expect any revelations, she said, making them feel even better. They say that when a new pope is ordained, he is taken into a room with some nuns who show him ancient sacred texts. Rumor has it then when he exits, his face is white as a sheet. The police officer had the same look on her face when she finished watching the video recorded by Pietro. She phoned a colleague in the police IT department and gave the order to run the X file. She was well out of her depth and may easily find herself reunited with Pietro. I don't know what will happen now. There will be no investigation as it has been snuffed out, but that file may have the answers. My last conversation with Pietro was hurried. He said he was close, but that you were in danger. If he had had more time, he would have sent it. Perhaps they knew he was onto them and that was the reason they made him believe you were in more danger than perhaps you were. She said. There were killers in here with knives. Lavinia responded. Ah yes. I knew I had worded that badly the minute I said it. She answered, supposedly including a non-verbal apology therein. In less than an hour, they had ransacked Pietro's room and left scant memory of the boy. She promised that everything would be returned at the earliest juncture. In the meantime, they should pack a bag and move to a safe place under police protection. She was about to say that things might get nasty but remembered what they had been through and decided to say nothing, this time. They were soon making their way out of the city to a hotel where there would be sufficient police protection for the moment that this all came to a head. The police officer, Edna, told them that she was still unsure what was going to happen, but expected that it would be soon. Indeed, she hoped it would be, as she could not explain this use of resources to her superiors. They switched on the television and asked if a few bottles of Moretti beer would not be a bad idea in the meantime. The rolling news channel still mentioned the usual dull stories until the calm was shattered by the banner breaking news: the X-File had done its work. The chief of police phoned Edna personally and asked about the whereabouts of Pietro's parents. Unsure of how to respond, she said she didn't know. He told her that that was the right response and that now was not the time to trust anyone. Scenes showed police cars darting around Turin, Milan and Rome, as well as other cities, to take a number of high-echelon politicians and civil servants into custody. If Pietro's fear was his undoing, his torturous vanity was his. He only decided to push Pietro as far as he would go as a sort of game, a pastime to alleviate his boredom. There was no actual need to make Pietro try to go through with the kidnapping. It had not been ordered from above, nor was it a necessary step in the process. Yet Pietro saw a gap, a flaw in the process that led to a way out. What he did not have was time. He got so close, but when the choice became save himself or save his parents, he opted for the latter. Young and impressionable to the extent that he believed that he would fail, and never be forgiven, meaning his life had become worthless. A schoolboy error on the part of the renowned Milan-based lawyer in charge of making sure some of the wealthiest people in the country were allowed to evade taxes and force the police to turn a blind eye to insalubrious activities was brought to a head by schoolboy genius. One piece of code in the wrong place alerted Pietro to the identity of the perpetrator. In the little time he had, he was able to amass sufficient information on the activities involved that couldn't threaten even to bring down the government. As the days passed and the arrests mounted, the tragic figure of Pietro became something of a hero, within reason. Nobody hid the initial nature of his quest, but what he did to turn things around would have a profound effect on the nation in the coming years. The true number of the top names that survived or fell will never be known. No matter how many of them were simply scapegoats as part of deals cut to save other souls, neither. But the carelessness of the Milan lawyer meant that Pietro's work, however misguided at the beginning, in the end served for a great deal. Every part in his macabre story became public, which led to a meeting of minds between Cavano and chairman of the club, who buried their differences. The former decided that he had had quite enough of the Italian league and returned to Spain for his final seasons as a player. He never went into management, claiming that what he had seen during his time in Italy had put him off football for life. Juventus did create a foundation headed by Pietro's parents to help youngsters and teenagers with issues that bore his name. That gave them a certain amount of solace and helped with the grief process, but it was hard. Every day just walking through the door and seeing his name in big black, Juve-style lettering was a reminder, apart from the other 11 million things that reminded them of him every day, just where they were, and how things will never be the same, the only aim now being that things can function, that they can move forward, that their memory of him remain positive and untarnished over time, despite the media furore. Soon they would tire of him, soon there would be something else. Lavinia tried to remain positive as she took the file off her desk, her first official case, no training, just diving straight in. For Pietro, she would help this kid,